Hello and welcome to the Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast show, once again powered by businessabc.net, citiesabc.com, and wisdom.ai. So one of the things that we've been profiling and bringing to this series is the people changing the way we look at our society, our business, our education organizations, our economics, and especially how we make the bridges between technology and business, and the narratives and the research that is key for everything that is happening around us. So we are in times of big change, probably more than ever in history of humanity. And then as well, there's a lot of fantastic challenges, and probably bigger opportunities, depends on how we look at it. So I'm quite excited to continue profiling some of the doers, researchers, and academics changing the world. And today I welcome to our series someone that is a fantastic academic and financial economist, academic and author and researcher. So I welcome Professor Ludovic Phalippou, that is a researcher that covers critical themes, including the performance of private equity funds, risk and return, estimation, liquidity, risk premiums, and regulatory challenges in the industry. Professor Ludovic is professor of financial economics at the academic area Head of Finance, Accounting and Economics at Saïd Business School, University of Oxford. Under his leadership, the school recently created the world's first cinematised educational case study titled Redeveloping Hope, and it will be part of one of the focus of this interview. And the study emphasizes financial tools and impact investing for MBA and EMBA students, and it caters for their Gen Z and Millennial preference for visual learning. Professor Ludovic has authored approximately 10 highly cited articles in top academic journals, which have been downloaded nearly 100,000 times and cited over 3,000 times. His work has been widely recognized and featured in the likes of The Economist, Financial Times, and the New York Times. And one of the papers that I particularly want to highlight is the paper How Alternative Are Private Markets. That is one of the 3 2018 recipients of the Jack Trainer Prize, sponsored by Q Group. And his work has been quite impactful in the areas of finance, economics, and all the different areas. And he has as well authored several books, including the bestseller Private Equity Laid Bare, now in its 3rd edition. So there's much more to read about it in the fantastic bio and profile. But I want to welcome you, Professor Ludovic. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to talk a bit about your background, because you have a fantastic academic career, but you've been as well going through a lot of different areas and studying a lot of different things. So before we go more in detail, a bit of your personal background, what made you focus on this part of your career, on the academic and then on the research?
I grew up on the French countryside and had the luck to go to Toulouse in undergrads in economics, just because it was free and nearest to my home, because that's all I could afford. And from there, professors sent me to the US, where I had contacts who could give me like scholarship, and then I followed that flow. So I had more chances or better prospects in academia, even as a PhD student, than I would have had in my French countryside. So this is how really I ended up doing a PhD. And how did I end up with private equity? It was just a guy in my class who had data that nobody else had, and we teamed up. And because hardly anybody had this data, this work received a lot of attention, and this is how my work was quite prominent, and I naturally specialized. So there is no like childhood trauma that many learn from it. I've always been passionate about economics.
Well, it's a fantastic down-to-earth approach to this, but as well very special. So that means the power of teachers, the power of random acts, or actually not random, some specific acts that made your life the way it is. So a bit of your academic research and your studies, because of course you have a huge amount of, I only touch part of that in your bio, but a bit of that, and I think for people listening to us, what goes behind building a career like yours in the academic and as well research world?
Well, what goes beyond a large number of hours and a bit, I guess, a certain mindset. Some people would call it screwed up a bit. So, from age 22, I've been spending 70 hours a week researching and working, basically, and almost all of that in one industry. So it's this thing that, academics are like hyper specialized and you spend hours and hours on like that one thing. And so when I talk to journalists, it's about private equity. I talk to my students, it's about that. When I do research, it's about that. And been doing this for like 25 years. So it's what was behind it is just like, a tremendous amount of work and a certain mindset, like this thing, like you become a bit obsessed with like turning everything that's done out there and finding out what there is to find out, and then having this eagerness to communicate it, right? So that's the teaching side of things, which is probably the side I enjoy the most, which is like, about communicating on your research, on the knowledge that you have accumulated, to share it as widely as possible. That's why I also talk a lot to journalists. That's why I talk on podcasts and the like. So that's what was behind it.
And then it's amazing, your work and the different parts. So I am, one of the reasons I want this, of course, is partly I love your research about, first of all, the work you've been doing in terms of a lot of the bridges between teaching financial and economics, which I think is a key element. I think most of the general schools don't teach enough. I am probably an example of that. I learned from myself, not probably from the university, although I have a master. And one of the parts that I want to touch, so I think probably if you want to touch about the work you've been doing in Saïd Business School, where we actually have quite a lot of different areas. And then I want to go to your paper. So let's talk about how you end up in the Saïd Business School and the work you do there as professor of financial economics and the academic area of finance, accounting, and economics.
Well, the first part is quick. Like, how do I end up in this school? I could have ended up in any school. I just applied. There is a job market, and then there is it's a pretty structured thing. So every year, people who graduate from PhD then go on the job market, and then there are different jobs, and it's a supply and demand matching. I first ended up in Amsterdam, but after that, you also have a job market for people who are already out and also approached me and a reasonable offer, and I made the move, and it has been a very good choice. But there is nothing again particularly exciting about that. Just a market.
Okay, so let's go to the more exciting part. I like the straight part. I think straightforward probably is, I think you're the most straightforward approach to this. And I think it's very important because economics is about foundation, numbers, and go to the point. So one of the fantastic works you do is Redeveloping Hope. So this is a cinematized educational case study that emphasizes how financial tools and impact investing can be used and caters for visual learning. I'm very focused on visual learning myself, and a lot of my work has been as well on that and data visualization. So tell us about this, and of course our team put some images, and we'll put some images as we speak, but I think this is a fantastic work.
Thank you very much. So I'm very excited about that. The background of this is the advantage of Oxford is that you come across all kinds of like amazing people, and so that's really what is very fortunate for to be in my position. So a couple of years ago, a student who had done a movie school in Columbia University in New York City came to do an MBA, and it does happen. We have people like that who are like, they're in the movie industry and they're qualified as such, but they need an MBA to navigate the business aspect of the movies. So this person wanted to be a movie director, and so comes to do an MBA. And I always had a bit at the back of my mind that I wanted to do something a bit better than just like interviews, or when we give video material to students, it basically is an interview. And then I had also an amazing alumni who I admire a lot, who is in New York City and has done amazing work and has told me a story. I have a few alumni that I find that story is fascinating, and he's one of them. And so putting these two things together, and also a bit inspired by a friend of mine who had done a case study with real actors, but not cinematized, in the sense that it's real actors reproducing a real situation. I thought this was really cool, but I thought we could bring it one step further, which is you have actors, but they don't exactly replicate the real situation. You cinematize it, so you create an arch of a story, you create a bit of like an intrigue and like something that like makes people want to watch it, right? Like if we just reproduce purely something that happened in practice, like step by step, word for word, it's not going to be super exciting. And so that gets you closer to like something like House of Cards or The Big Short or like these sorts of things. But these movies are are then more for the entertainment than for the education. There is some education, as you will learn a couple of things in The Big Short, but it's an hour and a half, and the education part is like 5 minutes of it, right? So here, balancing out, you want to sort of entertainment, House of Cards stars, just half an hour, but there's 10 minutes of a half an hour, which is really about education. And once you have watched it, you can easily talk about it in class for an hour and a half or 2 hours, unpacking a number of subtleties and even advanced people wouldn't have completely caught. And so that's what I was seeking, and I think it's a premiere as far as I can tell. So you have professional actors, like this has been, like the script has been written by professional script writer, with my participation, of course, my heavy input. And then hopefully people, when they watch it, they feel engaged and interested. And so in a sense, you follow the story of that guy and his struggle with his developers in New York City. The idea is that then by the end of the movie, you're like, can I see the Excel spreadsheet and crack the numbers myself and see exactly like, how I would tweak it? What is exactly the situation, right? So if I give you a case study with like an Excel spreadsheet, it's very unlikely that you'd be like, oh, yes, I want to go into this Excel spreadsheet and dig down the numbers and see for myself and think harder about it. If you watch a movie and there is a fight and things like that, then you're like, oh, wow, can I get the underlying data and play with that? Can I see like really how that would work out? So that was the idea. I think so far I've tested on a number of students, seems to be working. So yeah, I'm very excited about that movie. There are more things in the pipeline, but yeah, for now, like this case study was it's a premiere and it's pretty cool.
So can you just highlight what is behind this case study? Because I think it's a big challenge when it comes to financial and economics, and this is one of the questions I have for you. So probably it's a bigger question, but I want to touch the two things. We are in a paradox time. On one hand, we have more technology than ever. And of course, people like you and even me, we are doing quite advanced technology research and even building amazing things. But at the same time, we still have a huge amount of inequality and financial, I would say, very basic financial income and financial literacy. And this is a paradox because it's impacting all the world, and of course creates a huge perception of hope. And we see a lot of cases, especially from France. You see what is happening in France. It creates a lot of almost paranoia perception. But I would like to touch from two angles. You as an academic in one of the biggest financial educational institutions in the world, and as well this study of Redeveloping Hope. So how do you see this conversion between your research and introducing these elements together?
Yeah, it's already lined up because in a sense, the story itself of Redeveloping Hope is one of the importance of financial literacy, right? So one thing is, I make a movie to make finance more approachable for people, but the story itself is about that, right? So, and I completely agree with you that one of the biggest problems, I would even say, in the world is the lack of financial literacy. We have actually academic work that shows that bad choices by people who are less wealthy increases the wealth gap, right? So it's to a point that it's one thing not to have money, but actually these people make conspicuously wrong choices financially that penalizes them further, right? So you see people on like credit card strategies, like they get debt on credit cards, they could get debt otherwise, or they actually save some money at a lower rate than they draw on their credit card, like things like that. Refinancing of mortgages. There's like a fascinating study that shows that if you look at who optimally refinance a mortgage, it's like the wealthiest people. And the poorest people, they just don't know, they don't remember, they don't dare, I don't know, but they don't refinance their mortgages optimally, and then they pay higher interest rate than they ought to. This is a drama. This is like, it's really is a crime. And all these people lending at super high interest rate to poor people, like, etc. They create huge damages. And it's very paradoxical, but like, I think if you would ask people, what are your two main sources of worry? Like throughout life, you ask like throughout life someone, what has been your main source of worry? What has made your life difficult? It would be financial issues and then emotional relationship issues. Like this would be like the two main drivers of well-being of someone, a stress around finances, stress around relationship. And if you look at what we teach people at school, there is zero about how do you get along, with how two people can live and get along. There are lots of tips, right? There are lots of books written about it, excellent books. There are very good tips about how you can improve communication between two people to improve a relationship, etc. But we don't touch on these things at school. And for finance, it's the same thing. What I tell my students is that finance is a language, and I'm teaching it like a language. And the reason why people are not very familiar naturally with finance is because they have to learn the language. So we see lots of people, they say, well, I speak English, and that should be enough for me to get by. Well, right? Maybe you can get by without speaking Spanish, but without speaking finance is going to be tricky. And the words technically are English, but actually I can stop a lot of people in the streets, if not like 99.5% of people in the street, giving them some sentences that make sense to a professional in finance in a given area, and they would have no clue what this is, what the meaning of this is. And, we don't need to know, how nuclear jargon is like, okay? But the jargon of finance is required, and we never teach that. And even at university, I see all kinds of people that, they do a master in biology and then say, oh, I'm picking up a job in a bank, and you have never sat through a finance course. So there is this belief as well, it's like, you don't need to speak that language. So be like French people where you tell them, you don't need to learn Spanish, like it's close enough to French. Just go to Spain and just talk to people, like half French, half whatever, A at the end of each word, and then you get by, okay? And then you go out there, right? And you cannot do that, one word. And it's very important for people to realize that. So in the movie, in terms of like the content of the movie, what happened was caricaturing again for the sake of the story, but it's not too far from reality. You have an institution, which is New York City, where people are there managing the real estate of New York City, and they just want to do good. They want to help out. These are like people have chosen to be civil servants, to work for New York City, to improve neighborhoods and the like. They're well-meaning people. Okay. But they don't know finance. That's not their thing. Finance is, if anything, is a bit dirty, right? It's like, yeah, you don't want to talk about finance. I want to improve neighborhoods. I want to be a nice person. I want to be like the social guy. Okay. And then in front of you, you have people that say, it's okay. You want me to redevelop like this part in the Bronx? I can. But the rent in the Bronx is very bad. Look, I've done my research. Here's the rent in the Bronx. And I'm never going to get my money back if I just do this amazing building in the Bronx, right? And so what you need to do in New York City is giving me most of the money to build that stuff. Because look, this is the rent in the Bronx. I'm not going to get anything. And in the old days, people would say, yeah, that's it. We just give them what they say, right? And the movie shows, and crazy stuff. Like for example, the person would show the average rent in the Bronx over the last 30 years and take an average of that. But the rent keeps on going up every year. Like, what does that mean, taking an average over the last 30 years of the rent somewhere? Like, you take the latest number, right? You don't take an average of 30 years. I mean, it makes no sense. Of course you get a low number. Take an average of the last 100 years, it would be even lower. So if you know a minimum amount of finance, like there were like all kinds of arguments they were giving that they're just like completely crazy. Like there was one to say, okay, you give us a loan, but like we forgive a principal after like 10 years. And a loan but it's not amortizing, and you forget the principal after 10 years, well, you just basically pay me 3% interest a year and then we forget about it. That's not a loan. It's like, that's a grant. So, but anyone in finance will see that, with minimum amount of finance will see that. But the fact that these people try these sorts of things tells you that, in the past has gone through. These are like things that they have done. And these well-meaning social people may not, pick this up. All right. And so this alumni of mine who ended up a bit in a weird way, because he's a finance guy, ended up in that office, then told the developers that it's not going to work this way. He's going to do his own analysis. He's going to build his own financial model. He's going to get proper comparables. He's going to do proper projection of rent. He's going to calculate exactly how much money they're going to make to see how much we can push, like forcing the developer to pay people living wages and adding some social constraints and so on and so forth, and giving them the least amount of money possible from the city for the project to happen. Right? So for the social impact to happen at the lowest cost possible. And that's important because the money you save then enables you to do some more social impact, because you can finance some other project. And so, but this feels very natural and normal for any finance mindset, economics mindset. But for some people, surprisingly, this is not natural. If you are totally into your social, 100% social, finance is kind of like, I don't want to touch this. It will. And in fact, this very office of New York City had never built a financial model. And when they came to the developer with financial model, the developer was like, since when you guys are doing financial modeling? Like, what are you talking about? We've never had that in the past. We've been dealing with a city for 20 years. And so that's the content of the movie, right? And so then after you see the movie, the idea would be, you want to do this financial modeling yourself, right? You want to go and crack the data. You want to look up the details of the contract to see how crazy it was, what kind of clauses that have been added. There's a piece of financial engineering there as well to close the gap between the two opinions, the one of the developer and the city. So the idea is that once you've seen the movie and the fight, you want to learn about finance. You want to know the basic vocabulary. You want to see how you would do financial modeling. You want to understand this financial engineering thing, like the cash sweep, and you want to know a few more maybe. And so that's the idea, and so that's the pedagogy, and like triggering the curiosity and desire.
And this is actually, you touch a lot of very important things. That's a lot of questions that are open, but definitely the paradox is the way we have all this amazing education and availability, like you said, books and so forth, but still the education systems are still not completely tailored towards creating at least financial independence or financial literacy and a lot of different areas. And for instance, there was a study, I don't know the numbers right now, but I actually myself, I built a technology project to empower financial inclusion. And the study talks around 1.5 billion people in the world have not the basic financial inclusion, even in premium countries like the ones we live in the UK and others. So I want to touch in your work, and a lot of things you mentioned right now touch the layers of advanced economics, advanced data, and then very basic data that are a lot of products. So as well, we have a dichotomy between, of course, the right and the left, which unfortunately in the last 20th century created two world wars. But it seems like we're getting back to the same logic. So as a professor of financial economics, and I would like to go here a bit on history, how do you see this dichotomy and how this impacts financial? Because at the moment we have a paradox that with AI we can actually create fantastic elements of the most advanced technology in history of humanity. But at the same time, we have a lot of perception of, I would say what AI is doing hallucination is human hallucination, that we actually forgot the reality and we forgot the facts. So from your hat as a professor of financial economy and academic, how can we actually mitigate the risk of this, first of all, the lack of understanding the facts, and second, how we can actually create financial inclusion in a way that goes once and for all? Because I think that's the major problem of our society. If you don't mitigate this, we're going to create machines that are going to be more dystopian than us. And the story goes.
Yeah, I don't have a very good answer for that. But I want to strongly agree with the diagnostic. The dichotomy is becoming even stronger. And so it could be to a point where somebody would say, that guy is a French guy, Prof at Oxford, I'm a conservative guy, so I'm just not going to listen to whatever he's saying, whatever it is. Just don't listen to it. And so this polarization is a major issue. And people have their own facts, both in their head and in the group of social media peers. And that's very challenging as an instructor. So I have a paper that illustrates that. There is a lot of very good research on this. But the paper I wrote recently was to show that things that were supposed to certainly not be correlated were highly correlated. So if you want to know, if you imagine you would have access to all the variables out there and you would look for the one that is most correlated with the decision to take a third dose of a vaccine and for how many people or a fraction of people in a given county in the UK were put the COVID or died from the COVID, what would be that variable? And so people thought, look at income, look at education, throw them all in there. There is one that blows all of them out of the water. There is one that is so strongly correlated, and way more than anyone else, way more than any other variable. And that's how people voted at Brexit. Right? It's crazy. It should have nothing to do with one another, right? I cannot think of something less, less related than these two things. And it's not just that people voted no at Brexit. People voted no or abstained. So in fact, the fraction of people voted for Remain, but is the key variable. So whether you abstain at Brexit or voted no is what is most correlated with the decision not to take a third dose of vaccine or likelihood of catching COVID or dying of it. And it's true only after the first wave, actually. So during the first wave, everybody catches COVID and nobody knows what to do. Then there are clear instructions about how to avoid it, and then there are differences between people. And so the common point is that in both cases, the experts said something, and there are some people who just don't want to listen to experts. And so that's a very big problem, right? People are thinking, I have this expert telling me to manage my credit cards this way or that way, but I've had enough of experts. Experts are wrong, so I'm not going to listen. And so that's a very, very big challenge, and I don't really know how to solve that. I just keep on producing information and hoping that the highest fraction of people absorb it. But and I try to make it in the most palatable way possible so that it is absorbable in the easiest way. But I will always be out-tooled by, people who try to manipulate opinions because they will have access to more advanced tools than me to convince people of a given narrative. So I do my work, but I'm under no illusion that I can change it.
And I think you're right. It's doing our work every day and keep going. But I think we have to probably do more, especially the ones of us that have a responsibility in society, especially in the academy. And that's partly why I create this YouTube channel. So I want to go to your papers because, like you said, your papers are amazing and there's a lot of work that is taking. So I want, first of all, because, like you said, the challenge I have, even in my team, that is a tech company and an organization that I'm working with a lot of governments, I have a lot of challenge sometimes explaining very basic stuff. So I'm talking people that are investors in different parts. So if you look at your work, there's a lot of papers from, for instance, one of them is Alternative. Our alternatives are private markets, and your book, Private Equity Laid Bare. So let's touch a bit private equity, if you could explain a bit of your work and research on that, because I want to highlight this and the importance of this, because, of course, private equity is a huge chunk of the way a lot of the big funding and a lot of the work that has been elaborated on financial calculations for countries, organizations, and even financial systems, because, of course, private equity control a huge part of the world economy. So I would like to touch that, and as well, probably a bit of your research on this.
Yeah, so private equity is, when we say that, we're referring to private equity funds, because private equity is like any French bakery, it's private equity. So when we say private equity, it's private equity funds, and they are basically the number of people working for a company that is controlled by a private equity fund is about 10 million, both in the US and in Europe. So we're talking about a lot of people. And in Europe, it's mostly like the UK and Scandinavia, but also in other countries. So it's a big chunk of the economy, and it's also like a place where, like, if in France I would tell anybody private equity, or if I try to translate it in French, if I say leverage buyout, anything like that, like 99.9% of the people wouldn't know what we are talking about. So private equity is a big thing, and most of my work has focused on what was the deal for the people giving money into these funds. So these are like the pension funds, endowments, and increasingly wealthy individuals. And I've looked at, how much return they get, how much fees do they pay, the kind of conflicts of interest a fund manager is facing, how sometimes fund managers may be stealing or kind of stealing, being very close to stealing from their investors, and when not. So this has been very much a focus of most of my work in private equity. It's like, if you're a pension fund or any other type of investor in a private equity fund, what is it you need to know? What is the truth versus the marketing story?
Yeah, that's a good one, and I think even the nuances about geography are very important. So let me go back to the private equity. So for people listening to us, and I would say, if I would do an analysis, even the most sophisticated people in my audience, I think we would have probably 90% that have no clue about private equity. probably 99%. And this is my personal, as a teacher in business schools as well, that I found when I started asking questions. Last is financial students. So if you look at private equity and the way it works right now, so I'm talking the English Anglo-Saxon term and the private equity industry, like you said, the funds. So we've been working a lot on this research. So I would like to see if you could elaborate a bit How do you see this? Okay. And how you see this on a global scale?
So I've worked mostly on the investment side of private equity. So like if you're a pension fund, you give them money, what's the deal for you? And there is an increasing amount of work about how private equity impacts society. Do they, they increase the earnings of companies, but does that come at the cost of someone else, etc.? So I have some paper on like the care homes in the UK when they are controlled by private equity. What does that change? And there is a lot of papers on that time. It's a very recent trend in research. And the picture is mixed. And there will be a lot more work to be done, but there is a lot of people looking at this issue about how private equity impacts our society. But there is massive geographical differences because the only part of private equity that is controversial is actually the largest one, but it's what's called leveraged buyouts. So it's something that we find mostly in Western Europe, including the UK, Scandinavia, and North America. The rest of the world doesn't really have leveraged buyouts. They have sometimes some here and there, and they are controversial, but there are many of them. And you have a big chunk of private equity, which is what is called sometimes venture capital, growth capital, etc. And the rest of the world is mostly growth capital and venture capital. So private equity, that part is never basically controversial. In the rest of the world, you do have also some funds that are called like turnaround or venture funds, which is like they take companies that are like in bankruptcy and then try to revive them. These ones can be controversial. There are some countries in Asia where they were quite active and they were controversial. And so this image stayed a bit there, like in Japan, Thailand. But within private equity is mainly like large leverage buyouts who create the controversy. But it is about a bit more than half of the money invested in the sector.
Thank you. So on your book, Private Equity Laid Bare, you designed initially for an MBA course in private equity, and you aimed to familiarize the reader with the jargon and mechanics of private markets using simplified examples. So if you could just highlight, and I think for everyone that is interested on this, it's really important to look at this, but could you summarize, and I know that you are already in third edition, I would like to touch from the level of macro, how we would touch the conclusion on some of the conclusions. Of course, I think people should read the book and all the things related that you would highlight that are relevant for the world economy, especially when it comes to the private equity major areas related with.
The book is a bit more of a textbook. So it's, one third of the book is a dictionary, but I've tried to write the dictionary in a fun way so that you can read the jargon and like in a fun way. So the book is about everything there would be to know in private equity, in private markets. So both like how they operate companies and what the deal is when you invest in a fund. So the throughout, my obsession is always to make things fun and engaging so people do read and may find it easier to understand because it's a dry topic, it's a pretty dense topic. So most of the book is written with like Alice in Wonderland. So Alice is a private equity fund manager and Wonderland is a world of private markets. She can do all kinds of things there that people cannot do in other places in the economy. So that's a Wonderland. And the world is sometimes upside down. And so this Alice character is going through the book. And so to illustrate a bit like, the simplified examples and the like is that in the first chapter, I would explain how Alice can execute a leverage buyout. And I would do it on the example of like buying a house. So Alice wants to buy a house. She has no money. And then we explain how a leverage buyout, or she has very little money. And we can explain how a leverage buyout can enable her to control a house and do what she wants with it, to improve it, to increase it, and to do any kind of thing she thinks it would increase the value of a house, but without using any money of her own. And so that's an example of like, I can use a house that most people can relate to and understand. And then we go into some details of a leverage buyout, which is enough to like grasp what these transactions are about, and then pretty quickly understand why they're quite controversial and why they may create some discomfort for a number of stakeholders. So that's what the book does. Like throughout, it's always trying to boil things down to the essential, but give like all the key elements. For performance evaluations, it insists a lot on why the numbers that are given by the industry most often, which is internal rates of returns, are actually not rates of returns. They may sound like it, they may look like it, but they are not, and that makes people make a lot of mistakes. And so I try to bring the reader to this understanding with a funny character who's Mad Hatter, who's struggling with Alice's numbers, And then this way conveying this concept of why they are highly misleading numbers and so on. So that's the theme of the book. So that's not like one takeaway. It's more like, here's everything there is to know about the industry. And I'm going to try to write it in the most palatable way possible so that you actually read it.
Oh, fantastic. And it's really an important one because these areas are super important for all of us. So one of your vision and work has been, and we touched this a bit, but I want to go more deep, it's been about demystifying financial dynamics through your publications, podcasts, and academic leadership. And you've been especially focused on the discourse around risk management, governance, and performance evaluation, especially within private equity. So let's touch the part of risk management and governance. So from your research and your papers, how, if you look at the importance of risk management and governance, how can we actually look at your research and some of the highlights of your research?
I guess that the key takeaway would be that you need to be extremely careful in a situation like a private equity fund is, because you have somebody who's in control of an asset that you paid for as an investor. And whenever you're in a situation where somebody is controlling an asset with your money, this person has a zillion way to divert money to their own benefits instead of to yours. And so there you can rely on like, oh, but these are nice guys, I did my due diligence, etc. There are some nice guys, but human nature is such that, a nice guy may become not such a nice guy, or there are some not very nice guys out there. And the point is that even in a country like the US and the like, you have very low protections. And because the mantra has been that these are adults playing with adults, it's an adult who gave the right to another adult to control the asset with their money, and so they can do whatever they want. And that's extremely, extremely dangerous. And we have seen many examples of abuse, and there are many abuses we don't see. There are some abuses we suspect. There are some that I have demonstrated, but people really there are often very naive about this situation. Like, it's whenever you give your money to someone, say, okay, buy me stuff, and you have full control on that, the belief that this person is going to work in your best interest, try very hard to get as much money as possible and return it to you, is at best naive. And if you have no protection, it's wild. And so it has worked out okay-ish over the last 20 years-ish. And going forward, when returns are depressed and particularly funds like they are now find it difficult to raise money, it may get a bit more complicated.
So, talking about this, so we are facing one of the biggest historical debt, and this is macroeconomics, probably getting a bit out of private equity. I know that you're not a professor of macroeconomics, but I would like to touch on your research. So how do you see debt? Because at the moment, for instance, if you look at, we have a paradox in the world economy where we have, a couple of big corporations that are bigger. If you look at NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Apple, they are more or less the size of the fifth economy in the world, like the UK, or fourth, each of them. So, and as well, one thing is their GDP, the other thing is their debt. In the case of the US, the debt is quite significant, bigger. So some economists don't highlight so much the debt, others do. How do you see the debt? Is it a time bomb, or is something that you can mitigate through integration in society, especially bearing in mind this colossus of private economies?
The financial crisis has occurred via debt channel. So people have borrowed a lot of money, and the more good times are rolling, the more they accumulate debt. Right? So it's like it's never enough, right? So it's like, oh wow, we've done 3 years and there's still no bankruptcies. Let's loosen the standards. Oh wow, 1 more year and still no catastrophe. Let's loosen standards. And so like you keep losing standards and adding debt until it explodes. And it's like every single time it's the same thing. The debt accumulated over the last 10 years is mind-boggling. Like the layers of debt there is everywhere. It's just like mind-boggling. Historically, this has never ended up well. We have some reason to think that maybe it would be a bit better because it's not so much the banks that lend, although they did via some indirect products. But nonetheless, it's very tricky. And right now, there hasn't been as many bankruptcies as there should have been because you do have a bit of a downturn and increase in interest rate, and this in any time in the past would have been enough to get an explosion. We've got only mini explosions, but we haven't had a wave of bankruptcy we would have expected given the situation. And we can expect that it is because the debt providers have changed a bit in nature And there are lots of people who have actually, like they're not banks, so they raise money from other people in order to invest in debt, so in order to lend. And it is in their best interest not to force the bankruptcies and the like, because they want to keep on raising money. And so they cover up as well. So there are more layers of people whose best interest it is to cover up, even when things are not going well. So maybe this has a good thing, which is that, things aren't exploding, but it might be as well just be delaying the problem, making it bigger down the road. So there are reasons to worry about the gigantic amount of debt in the system. It's shocking.
I subscribe, and it's really, well, we didn't have a crisis almost for a couple of years. So we might get one. And I think it's important for people to highlight this, because I think there's been, a discourse around deleting the importance of debt and the importance of paying the bills. And this brings me to one question. So, for instance, you touch, of course, the challenge we had, for instance, with the reality versus non-reality and people perception, like Brexit and a lot of different things, because we had recently, of course, COVID, there was a vaccination, there was a lot of things. And this created kind of a huge part of society that is starting to almost not believe in some kind of truth. So one of the questions I want to highlight, and especially as a person that does research, and of course, you do a lot of research in private equity, and most of the private equity right now are being managed by a lot of technology, algorithms, and the most advanced technology. So when we create, and of course, economics is about maths and about numbers. So one of the questions I have, and this is one of the big things that's in my head for a long time, is with artificial intelligence and big data, in the end of the day, we are creating models that are based, especially if it's generative AI, in language and language calculation, and adapt the answers based on language and, of course, the large language models behind it. So when it comes to financials, we are actually preparing financials to, of course, to create better numbers to avoid the economical inequality that we are facing. But we are creating a huge paradox, is that, like we just discussed, we have in one end this amount of debt, in one end this amount of wealth being created, because the world GDP is right now passing $100 trillion. And at the same time, we have, if you look at all the speculation around the derivatives and different parts, I think we passed probably $1,000 trillion or more. The numbers are very diverse. I'm sure probably someone in your team, or at least in your research, has been working on some of these papers. But I want to highlight from your work, purely on the numbers, can we match at a certain point? That's the question, is, will we have a time where the machines will tell us, guys, this doesn't make any sense from a numbers perspective? Or are you going to create, or do you think, so for instance, all the AI models right now, they, at least this is mainstream numbers, highlight that 20% of the data is hallucinated. So that means 20% of the data of course, the numbers vary when any of this large language model hallucinates. So do we have a possibility, and this is actually, of course, a thesis of another professor of Oxford, actually quit, that I had here on the series, Nick Bostrom. Can we actually create a parallel kind of hallucination collective? And I know that is a big question, but I want to touch it from an economical pure perspective.
So in private equity, there is not much AI or big data or machine learning being used. I've been part of like 2 or 3 papers that do these things, but there is not much. Private equity is still very much old style. It's like, people chatting over dinner about buying a company, and then lawyers doing a lot of work, and it's all manual, and it takes hours. But you have data is one thing, but it's not. This is different from using large language models and machine learning tools. So you have, in any due diligence in a deal, you collect a lot of data, but any econometric analysis or statistical analysis is pretty basic. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone using large language models as part of summarizing the data in a deal or things like that. I've done it in my research. We have a paper where we analyze employee satisfaction for one meeting employee working for different firms when they get into private equity hands and not. And we looked at the reviews and we do natural language analysis and processes. But like I don't think anyone has ever done that, and not in practice for sure. And so I don't think but they collect data, sure, but it's not like a statistical analysis is very advanced, or but they use AI tools. So my work has received quite some attention because there are a few papers like using these tools in that space, but it's more like for anecdotal in the sense like it's more like for the progress of science or to show a proof of concept, but it's not going to be like changing the way private equity transactions are conducted or whether they will be more reasonable with debt or not, etc. Like it's very human. Like how much debt you put on a company is not going to be given by a number. But there's no algorithm that gives like, okay, this company should have X amount of debt. Like hedge funds would do these things, but private equity, the optimal amount of debt on a company is never determined by any sorts of models. It's bankers sitting down and say, they have financial models, there is an Excel spreadsheet, and then the bankers saying, okay, I think this is a sustainable amount of earnings, I multiply by 6, and that's the debt capacity. See, that's the level of complexity. There is no one who says, I've written like 10,000 lines of code and we're going to put all the data in there and it's going to tell us how much the debt for this company needs to be and how it should be structured. Like absolutely no one would do that.
It's interesting, actually. I had a slightly different opinion, but effectively, it's interesting paradox to the question and to what we have. So that means even more paradoxical that all these AI models and large language models can actually create a lot of interesting questions for the sense of the way the economy goes. I know that I passed 1 hour, so I have still a couple of questions that you are opening me and a lot of points into research. So in terms of the work you've been doing, I would like to touch one of the things that I think it's quite important. So like you said, a lot of your work has been looking at the tools and the research. So how do you see the role of financial tools evolving in addressing special social and environmental challenges? Because I think this is a key element, especially for private equity and for the world society.
Yeah, I think that would require a full hour just for that topic. I'm writing a book at the moment on sustainable private markets where we talk at length about these things. A bit hard to summarize, but in a sense, there is a lot of appetite for sustainable markets, a lot of well-meaning people, which is very good, but we need a much more radical approach to have any sort of meaningful advances. And to me, we cannot have a radical approach if people do not go more on facts, clear definitions, and be more thoughtful and intellectually rigorous when discussing these issues. It remains by and large people who have emotions, belief, desires, and then create narratives or window dress in order to get their views or desires going through. I think this will not fly. We see already a lot of backlash in the US, with other places on these sorts of mindset and approaches. And so I think it's a wrong approach. And so in that book, I detailed a bit about what can be done. But this movie we talked about earlier, in a sense, illustrates that if you face the trade-offs hands-on instead of ignoring them or pretending there is no trade-off, instead of pretending it's all will win, you face the trade-off. You're rigorous about it. You build your models. You cost everything, and then you say, okay, the city will lose money by paying living wages, but this is the right thing to do. We believe in that, and so we just do it. And so I would expand on that book, but it's a very big question. But at the moment, there is some good evolution, but it's extremely slow, and it's also a bit misleading. Like lots of financial products out there try to sell this win-win mantra, which is not realistic, and create a lot of damage.
So we have a lot of risks in the way we use this and how we take this forward. So then I want to touch this element of sustainability. So from your research in of course, it's private equity, but as well in financial and economics. So when you look at the world economy, and I think another macro question, from your research and applying, for instance, just the private equity is 6% of the US economy. This is numbers from the World Bank 2024, and it comprehends around 22 million jobs. You touched that as well before. So how can we look at a better narrative purely from a financial level and economics, bearing in mind a lot of the research you did for the world economy? Because we are in I think everything is possible at the stage we are, because in one end we have a lot of possibilities, but it depends on geopolitics and a lot of the parts. But let's look purely on the numbers of financial and economics, because it's part of your research.
I mean, if your question is about like what's going to happen, I don't make forecasts.
No. Purely research driven. Yeah.
I would say the best advice is like, don't be naive. Don't think that, this is Disneyland. There are all kinds of people with superior knowledge that will take advantage of you and will pull your trousers down. And so just be as educated as you can be, as informed as you can be. Do not assume the best. Start with the worst, maybe. Then be like extremely, aware and as educated as you can be, as informed as you can be.
So you see things in a perspective so there's at the moment two ways of going into economics. That is, one is more social impact driven economics, the other one more competitive and ultra capitalist. So how you see these two narratives?
So it goes back to this book I'm trying to write, that I think that if people are clear about, I don't want to get the highest returns possible. I don't want to make as much money as possible. I want to have a positive impact in the world. And I understand that. Then having a positive impact doesn't mean that I have a portfolio with nice companies in it. That's just window dressing. That's just about feeling good. Having real impact is I have created additionality. And even if I cannot measure it, I can have a sense of what it means. It means that my money made a difference in a positive way. And so very likely I've made concessions on the returns, because if there was no concession on returns, then these things would happen anyway without my intervention. So I understand that if I want to move the world towards a better place, then I will have to make some sacrifices financially and otherwise. And so once this is well recognized, and then again that people are clear about the vocabulary, but their frame of mind is sufficient to understand, the right vocabulary, the right approach, the right mindset, then we can start seeing changes that are real. Because then the narratives will be clean instead of being like window dressing all the time and being like smoke and mirror. It would be, cleaner, and then competition should make things work correctly, because if people have the right information, I think deep down that a lot of people are well-meaning. They want to have the world as a better place rather than just maximizing their own wealth. And so if then they are given the options to do that in a frank, honest way, and they understand they can distinguish between the guys who are selling them a dream and somebody who's selling them something real, then we can get somewhere. So we go back to that re-education, having the right mindset and the right education.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's the key element. So one of your papers, and I will try to be synthetic, but so one of your papers is thematic investing with big data, the case of private equity. I would like to touch this because, of course, my audience is quite technology driven. So I'll just look at the abstract for people listening. Now, if you could elaborate about this. So using natural language, this is from your abstract, using natural language processing, we score companies based on the frequency in which news articles contain both their names and terms private equity and leverage buyout. An index is then created and can be updated seamless at high frequency. So could you elaborate a bit on this paper and the impact effectively of the investing with big data? Because it's an area that is...
This was, again, an illustration of what you could do with these databases that summarize and collect all the press releases in the world. So you have this is Ravenpack. They have this massive database of all press releases in the world. And so the sorts of things you can do is that you can automatically select companies based on how much you're exposed to something. You say, I want to know all these publicly traded companies that are in the business of private equity and leverage buyouts. And then can I have an index that weight companies as a function of how exposed they are to it, but at the same time is smart in terms of liquidity and so weight things accordingly. So that's what this paper demonstrates. And if you wanted to add the word impact or venture capital, if you wanted to add some other keywords, the index composition would change. And so you can then tailor an index to someone's desire using this wealth of data in press release, because you can see how different companies are exposed to different themes. And so if, for example, a company like BlackRock, who historically has not done much in private equity, and you're interested in private equity exposure and you don't have much of BlackRock, but if BlackRock starts, as they are, buying a large number of companies that are in private equity space, like they buy a data provider like Preqin, they buy some private credit funds, and so on and so forth, then all of a sudden BlackRock is a lot more of a private market player, then the press release will tell you that, in which it will be written. And so you will pick up live that BlackRock is getting more and more exposed to private equity. And so if you want to have a private equity player, then you should have some BlackRock in your portfolio. So that is the sorts of things that I demonstrate was very easily feasible and implementable using a database like Raven. In the paper on employee satisfaction, we read the reviews of people, and then we, on the pros and cons of working for a given company, and then we try to see what are the themes that people usually have in the pros and in the cons, and then we see how these themes change when they get in and out of venture capitalist hands, or when they go in and out of a leveraged buyout hands, and so on and so forth.
Okay, well, I think we went through a lot of very powerful questions. So I want just to highlight one thing more right now in your educational work. So of course you teach your students all these areas of this. So I would like to see for people listening to us, especially young people, they want to study these areas. And I think we touched the importance of financial inclusion, the importance of looking at risk, and especially debt. Someone has always to pay the bills. What would be your advice for people that potentially want to study financial and economics and some of these areas, and as well probably the wise words that you would have for them?
I don't know. I think it's good if they want to study these things. There is more and more like online course offering, which I think is a very good solution. It tends to be a bit lower cost, more flexible, and so I would encourage them to look at this offering. I have an online course on private equity, for example, and I do think that the future of learning is very much online, and with things like I'm quite addicted to Duolingo. And so, like I said, finance is a language to me. There are tools like Duolingo, which is extremely clever for making learning extremely effective. And so, I think that the ultimate goal would be to have like a Duolingo for finance. And so people can choose the format that would work best for them to get education in finance. But I think, podcasts and I have also a podcast series on my website. And online education can be very powerful and effective ways to acquire knowledge.
Well, I want to thank you because there's a lot of more questions, but I want to push more.
Yeah,
so
I need to go. Yeah, sorry.
No worries. So I appreciate. So first of all, for people listening to us, a masterclass in a lot of topics that probably are not so used, and of course very important. Thank you, Professor Ludovic. Quite exciting. Made me think a couple of ideas, especially in the advanced and non-advanced and very basic stuff that are important. We'll put all the links to your digital profiles and as well your research. And I want to thank you for this fantastic work on all this research that are super important for us.